That grave is empty. The little girl told the millionaire at the funeral, and when they opened it, they discovered a miracle. Comment what you thought of this story with a score from 0 to 10 and let me know which city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The bell of Havenwood's main church echoed heavily on Tuesday morning, its 9 chimes seeming to carry the weight of grief that spread through St. John's Cemetery. William Thompson, 47, stood motionless before the freshly dug grave, where his mother, Eleanor, would rest, the woman who had been his only true family his entire life. His hands, calloused from work at the metallurgical plant, trembled slightly as he held the handful of dark earth he was meant to toss onto the casket. 3 days had passed since the car accident on the highway connecting Havenwood to Rockland. 3 days since his life had shattered like glass against wet asphalt. Eleanor, at 73, had left on a rainy morning to visit a friend in the neighboring town, something she had done for decades without ever encountering a problem. But in the early hours of that Monday, the brakes of her old Chevy sedan simply failed on the mountain descent. The mourners huddled around the grave, familiar faces from the working-class community that had grown up alongside Thompson Metallurgical. William recognized each of them, workers his mother had fed in hard times, neighbors she had helped when money was scarce, simple people who saw in Eleanor a mother figure for the whole community. Isabella Reyes, a 38-year-old secretary who had worked at the plant for over a decade, watched her boss with concern. She had known William since he took over his father's business and had never seen him so devastated. He was a man of few words, dedicated to his work and family responsibilities, but always maintaining a firm stance in the face of adversity. Now, however, he seemed to have lost his very soul. Mr. Thompson, Cassian Marshall, a junior partner in the company, approached, his impeccable black suit contrasting with the simplicity of the other attendees. "I'm very sorry for your loss," he said. Mrs. Eleanor was an admirable woman. His voice carried a tone of rehearsed condolence, and Isabella noticed how his eyes scanned the group of mourners with a calculating expression that didn't fit the solemnity of the moment. It was in this instant of respectful silence that a sharp cry tore through the morning air. All heads turned toward the source of the sound, a dirty little girl about 4 years old, who had emerged from behind a nearby mausoleum. Her dark hair was tangled, her clothes torn and stained with dirt, and her large eyes shone with a disturbing intensity. "The grave is empty," the child shouted, pointing directly at Eleanor's grave. "There's nobody in there. I saw the man messing with her car." An indignant murmur spread among those present. Some people made the sign of the cross. Others whispered comments about the poor manners of letting a street child disrupt a funeral. The priest, embarrassed, tried to calm the situation by gesturing for someone to remove the girl. "How absurd," an elderly mourner muttered. "Where are this child's parents? She must be one of the beggars from downtown," another commented. "They have no respect for anything." But William remained fixed, watching the girl with a strange expression. There was something in the intensity of her gaze, in the conviction with which she repeated her words, that prevented him from simply ignoring the interruption. As other people tried to lead the child away, he took a step forward. "Wait," he said, raising a hand to stop the people already moving to expel the girl. "What did you say about the car?" The child looked directly at him, showing no fear of the authority that emanated from his presence. "The man messed with the dead lady's car. I saw him. It was early in the morning when I was looking for food." "Maya," a harsh voice cut through the air as a middle-aged woman, visibly drunk even at that hour, stumbled between the tombstones. "Maya, get out of there right now." "Sorry, folks." The girls troubled. The woman, who identified herself as Evelyn, grabbed the child's arm with unnecessary force. "She makes up stories. Don't pay her any mind." But William had noticed something crucial. When Evelyn touched Maya, the girl flinched instinctively, and for a brief moment, the sleeve of her torn blouse rode up, revealing dark marks on her small arm, marks that were clearly not from childish games. "Aunt Evelyn, please," Maya pleaded, her small voice filled with fear. "I just wanted to help." The evident conflict between aunt and niece further piqued William's attention. He had grown up watching his own mother take in abandoned children, feed the hungry, and he had developed a keen instinct for recognizing genuine suffering. What he saw in that girl was exactly that: real pain, true fear, and a hopelessness that no 4-year-old should carry. "I really saw him," Maya insisted, looking at William again. "The man had a big screwdriver and was messing around under the car, then he ran away." Cassian Marshall quickly intervened, placing himself between William and the two females. "William, we can't take the ramblings of a street child seriously. We know what happened, a mechanical failure, that car was old." But something in Cassian's hurried tone bothered William. It was the first time he had seen his partner so eager to end a conversation, especially one that could shed light on the tragedy that had devastated his life. "Where were you that morning?" he asked Maya directly, ignoring the growing protests from the mourners. "Under the creek bridge, where I sleep," she answered without hesitation. "I wake up early because the dogs make noise. I saw the man messing with the blue car that was parked in front of the grandma's house. Eleanor lived in a simple house on Maple Street, exactly where she used to park her blue Chevy every night." The fact that a street child knew these specific details made William reconsider the situation. Isabella, who had remained silent observing the whole scene, quietly approached her boss. "Mr. Thompson, maybe it's worth hearing what she has to say." "This is absurd," Evelyn exploded, swaying dangerously on her feet. "The girl's a problem. She makes up lies all the time. That's why no one can keep her." It was that sentence that sealed William's decision. The way Evelyn referred to her own niece, the evident contempt in her voice, the drunkenness at a funeral, it all reminded him of the lessons of compassion he had learned from Eleanor. "How long have you two been on the street?" he asked, directing the question to both Maya and Evelyn. "Since her husband disappeared," Maya answered with painful honesty. "Auntie said it was my fault he left." Evelyn pulled the girl harder. "Enough! I'm not going to stand here and be humiliated. Let's go, Maya." But William stepped forward, interposing himself between them. For the first time since hearing of the accident, he felt a clear purpose emerging from the fog of pain that consumed him. "Wait, I need to talk to both of you." The decision he made in that moment, before his mother's grave and under the astonished gaze of the entire community, would change not only his own life, but also the destiny of a child who had been rejected by everyone who should have protected her. The Havenwood sun began to warm the cemetery stones as William finally tossed the handful of earth onto Eleanor's coffin, but his thoughts were no longer focused solely on his farewell. There was something in Maya's words that had awakened a deep unrest, a need to seek answers that might change everything he thought he knew about his mother's passing. William's house in the affluent part of Havenwood had never received such an unlikely visitor. Maya remained huddled on the living room sofa, her large eyes scanning every detail of the room with the same intensity she had shown at the cemetery. It was as if her mind were a camera, capturing and archiving every piece of visual information with impressive precision. "Did Aunt Evelyn leave?" the girl asked, breaking the silence that had settled since they arrived from the ceremony. "She did," William replied, sitting in a nearby armchair but keeping his distance so as not to frighten her. "She said she had other commitments, but would be back to get you." Maya nodded, showing no surprise or sadness at her aunt's departure. In fact, William noticed a subtle relief in her expression, as if Evelyn's absence brought her more comfort than her presence. Isabella came from the kitchen carrying a tray with sandwiches and orange juice. "Maya, you must be hungry," she said, approaching carefully. The girl's reaction was immediate and telling. Her eyes lit up at the sight of food, and she devoured the sandwiches with a voracity that betrayed long periods of deprivation. As she ate, she continued to observe everything around her, as if memorizing every object, every color, every texture. "Maya," William said softly, "can you tell me more about what you saw that morning?" The girl stopped chewing and looked at him directly. The man was tall, wore dark clothes, and had a big belly. He spent a long time under the car with the shiny tool. "Did you manage to see his face?" Maya closed her eyes for a moment, as if projecting the images recorded in her memory. He had short hair, kind of bald in the front, and he had a gold ring on the hand holding the screwdriver. The description made William swallow hard. Cassian Marshall wore exactly such a gold ring on his ring finger, a class ring he wore proudly. "Continue," he urged. "Anything else you remember?" He was talking to himself. He said something about "this time it'll work." A chill ran down William's spine. If Maya was telling the truth, then his mother's accident had not been an accident. Someone had deliberately sabotaged Eleanor's car. For the next 2 hours, William asked careful questions, testing the child's memory. He asked her to describe the man, the car, the location again, and always got the same answers, with additional details emerging naturally. "She has a photographic memory," Isabella murmured. "It's rare, but I've heard of children like this." The discovery of Maya's special ability completely changed William's perspective on her testimony. She wasn't just a traumatized child making up stories. She was someone with an exceptional cognitive ability who had witnessed something terrible. When the afternoon arrived, Evelyn returned to William's house, but her condition had worsened significantly. The smell of alcohol was even stronger, and she stumbled dangerously up the front steps. "I've come for the girl," she announced, trying to sound firm but failing miserably. "We've troubled you enough." "Actually," William said, gently blocking the entrance, "I'd like to talk to you about Maya's situation." Evelyn frowned. "What situation?" "She's my niece. I take care of her. May I ask how long you've been on the street?" The question clearly bothered Evelyn, who averted her gaze. "That's none of your business. We've been through hard times, like a lot of people." But Maya, who had approached the door upon hearing her aunt's voice, interrupted. "Since Uncle Benedict left, Auntie said it was because I'm bad luck." The revelation brought more details about the family situation. Benedict, Evelyn's husband, had left home after a series of arguments about Maya's care. According to the child herself, who recounted the events with the brutal honesty typical of her age, Evelyn blamed her niece for all the misfortunes that had befallen the family. "After Maya's parents died in the factory fire, everything went bad," the girl explained, oblivious to the impact of her words. "Auntie said I brought bad luck to everyone." William felt as if he had been punched in the gut. "What factory?" "The textile factory that burned down. Mom and Dad worked there." Isabella and William exchanged a meaningful look. 5 years ago, a devastating fire had occurred at Hope Textiles, one of the metallurgical plant's partner companies. Several people lost their lives, but William didn't know that Maya's parents were among them. "What were their names?" he asked. "David and Maria Santos," Maya replied without hesitation. The name David Santos was familiar. William vaguely remembered a man with that name who had worked briefly at the metallurgical plant. Evelyn realized she was losing control of the situation. "Enough talk. Maya, we're leaving now." But William made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "I'd like Maya to stay here tonight. I can offer her a safe place to sleep, proper food." "You can't keep her," Evelyn protested, but her indignation sounded more like desperation than genuine authority. "She's family." "A family that lets her sleep under bridges," William retorted, finally letting his anger overflow. "Look at her, Evelyn, really look. When was the last time this child had a bath? When did she eat a full meal? The question left Evelyn speechless, and Maya took advantage of the silence to move closer to William. "Can I really stay? I promise I won't make a mess." The simplicity of the request broke everyone's heart. It was as if the girl was used to being seen as a burden, a problem to be tolerated, not a child deserving of care and affection. Isabella knelt down to Maya's level. "Of course you can stay. We'll get a nice room ready for you." Evelyn made a few more weak objections, but eventually agreed to let Maya spend the night at William's house. She promised to return the next day to sort out the situation, but everyone sensed she was more interested in getting rid of the responsibility than in actually caring for her niece. When Evelyn finally left, stumbling down the dark street, William found himself alone with Maya and Isabella. The house, which just days ago was a silent sanctuary of grief, now echoed with the presence of a child who had survived more tragedies than many adults. "Mr. Thompson," Isabella said as she helped Maya take a bath, "you need to know that Cassian Marshall has called 3 times since we got here. He said it was urgent." The information confirmed William's growing suspicions. If Cassian was so anxious to talk to him right after the funeral, especially after Maya's testimony, something was very wrong. That night, while Maya slept in the guest room, the first truly safe and comfortable place she had known in months, William stayed awake in his office, analyzing documents from the plant. He was looking for any irregularity, any sign that Cassian might have a reason to harm him. What he found in the financial spreadsheets was staggering. There were significant discrepancies in the records for the last 6 months, figures that didn't add up, contracts that seemed inflated. If his suspicions were correct, Cassian had been embezzling money from the company for a long time. But why sabotage Eleanor's car? The answer came when William remembered a recent conversation with his mother. She had mentioned that Cassian had approached her several times, offering to buy her share in the company for a price well below market value. Eleanor, with her life experience, had sensed something was wrong and had started asking questions. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Cassian. "William, finally. I need to talk to you urgently. It's about the company." "You can talk," William replied, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Not over the phone. Can we meet at the office early tomorrow, before the employees get in?" The urgency in Cassian's voice set off all the alarms in William's mind. "Sure. Is 8 o'clock good?" "Perfect." "And William, about that child at the cemetery today, I hope you didn't take her fantasies seriously." The comment confirmed that Cassian was worried about Maya's testimony, very worried. After hanging up, William went to check on the girl. He found her sleeping soundly but talking softly in her dream. He moved closer to listen and could make out a few words. Daddy, fire, bad man. Even in her sleep, Maya carried the weight of all the tragedies she had witnessed. William understood in that moment that this was not just about providing temporary shelter to a child in need. Maya knew something that could be the key to uncovering the truth about Eleanor's death. The Havenwood dawn was long and restless for William, who knew that the morning meeting with Cassian could change everything. The metallurgical plant office at 8 in the morning had a heavy silence that made every step echo down the hallway. William arrived before the agreed-upon time, his nerves on high alert after a sleepless night, spent analyzing documents and rethinking every conversation he'd had with Cassian in recent months. During the night, he had discovered even more serious irregularities in the accounting books, mysterious transfers, inflated contracts with shell companies, and most disturbingly, regular payments to a certain Timothy Santos, who was listed as a technical consultant. William knew all the plant's suppliers, and that name had never come up before. Cassian appeared on time, but his appearance betrayed that he hadn't slept well either. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled, and there was a palpable nervousness in his gestures as he greeted William. His hands trembled slightly, and he avoided direct eye contact. Thanks for coming so early, Cassian said, closing the office door behind him with more force than necessary. We need to talk about the company's future, especially now that your mother, well, now that things have changed. William remained silent, observing his partner's every move. He had known Cassian for over 10 years, but for the first time, he was seeing him as a dangerous stranger. He noticed that Cassian was wearing strong cologne, probably to mask the smell of alcohol wafting from his clothes. The thing is, we have some outstanding debts, Cassian continued, nervously opening a folder full of papers. Contracts that your mother had questioned, but they're legitimate. I need you to sign some authorizations to regularize the situation. What kind of debts? William asked, leafing through the documents. The amounts were astronomical, related to supposed raw material supplies he had never authorized. Some contracts dated back to periods when the company hadn't even expanded production. Emergency purchases I made to keep production going. Your mother was being, let's say, overly cautious with spending. The way Cassian referred to Eleanor made anger rise in William's throat. His mother had been a meticulous and experienced administrator, never overly cautious. If she had questioned these expenses, it was because something was fundamentally wrong. I need to review these documents carefully, William said, deliberately closing the folder. I'm not signing anything today. Cassian's expression hardened instantly, and for the first time, William saw a real threat in the eyes of the man he had considered a trusted partner. William, you don't understand the gravity of the situation. If we don't regularize this by the end of the week, the company could be seized. Then explain how we got to this point without my knowledge. Cassian hesitated, his eyes darting to the window where the plant's yard was beginning to stir with the arrival of the first employees. Your mother was making decisions without consulting you. I thought it best to handle things directly with her. The lie was so obvious that William felt a cold confirmation of his suspicions. Eleanor would never make major financial decisions without consulting him. She was the one who had insisted he gradually take full control of the company, meticulously preparing him for this responsibility. How long have you been embezzling money from the plant? William asked directly, deciding to drop all pretense. Cassian turned pale, but tried to maintain his composure. How dare you accuse me of— Answer the question. The ensuing silence was eloquent. Cassian realized his charade was over, but he still tried one last gambit, adopting a condescending tone that only irritated William more. You're distraught over your mother's loss, he said, trying to sound understanding. You're seeing conspiracies where there are none. Maybe you should take a vacation. Let me handle the business for a while, like you handled my mother's car. The question landed like a bomb in the office. Cassian froze, his eyes widening in poorly disguised panic. His hands automatically went to his shirt collar as if he were choking. What are you talking about? A child saw you sabotaging the brakes on my mother's Chevy on the morning of the accident. Cassian tried to laugh, but the sound came out forced and desperate. A child. William, you're delusional. What child? The girl who interrupted the funeral. She has a photographic memory and remembers every detail, including your class ring. The mention of the ring made Cassian instinctively look at his own hand, further confirming his guilt. He realized his mistake and quickly hid his hand in his pocket. But it was too late. This is ridiculous. You're going to believe the delusions of a homeless girl. She described you perfectly, including your words, "This time it'll work." What does that mean, Cassian? What other attempts were there? Cassian stood up abruptly, starting to pace like a cornered animal. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the creditors, the threats. What threats? I owed money to dangerous people. I needed to get a large sum quickly, or— Cassian stopped, realizing he was confessing. William felt a mix of disgust and sadness. So you decided to kill me to take control of the company? No, Cassian screamed, desperate. The plan was for you to have an accident, something that looked like mechanical failure. Your mother wasn't supposed to be driving that car that morning. The explicit confession left William speechless for a few seconds. The confirmation that his mother had died in his place, a victim of a cowardly plot to murder him, was like a punch to the gut. You killed an innocent woman, he said, his voice trembling with contained rage. It was an accident. I didn't want her to get hurt. You sabotaged the brakes of a car knowing someone could die. That's not an accident, it's murder. Cassian realized he had completely condemned himself. His desperation turned into something more dangerous, the fury of a man with nothing left to lose. And what are you going to do? He asked, his voice now laced with threat. Call the police. Based on the testimony of a traumatized child. I'm going to do exactly that, Cassian laughed bitterly. You think it'll be that simple? I know a lot of people in this town, William. Judges, the sheriff, DAAS. I have information that could destroy several reputations. Are you threatening me? I'm being practical. We can sort this out between us. You sign these papers, I pay my debts, and I leave the partnership. End of story. William stared at him with contempt. And let you go free after you killed my mother? Never! It was then that Cassian completely lost control. He lunged at William, trying to physically assault him, but years of heavy labor at the plant had kept William in shape. He easily deflected the attack, pinning Cassian against the wall. You're going to pay for what you did, William growled, holding his former partner by the shoulders. At that moment, the office door flew open and Isabella ran in, accompanied by Maya. The girl had insisted on coming to the plant to help Uncle William. It's him, Maya shouted upon seeing Cassian. That's the man who messed with the car. The child's presence seemed to snap Cassian's last thread of sanity. He broke free from William's grip and ran for the door, but stumbled in his own anxiety and fell heavily to the floor. Don't let him get away, Maya pleaded, hiding behind Isabella. He's bad. William pinned Cassian down again, this time more firmly. Isabella, call the police and call Robert Miller, my lawyer. While they waited for the authorities to arrive, Cassian alternated between desperate pleas and veiled threats. He tried to convince William that other people were involved, that his arrest would put everyone in danger. You don't know who you're messing with, he muttered. There are powerful people behind all this. But William was no longer willing to listen. Eleanor's death had been avenged, at least partially. Now he had to ensure Maya was safe and that the whole truth came out. When the police finally arrived, they found a broken man confessing his crimes between tears of despair. Maya, brave despite being only 4, repeated her testimony with the same precise detail she had shown from the beginning. Cassian's arrest was just the beginning. William knew he would have to face the consequences of what he would discover in the coming days, especially if the threats about powerful people proved true. 3 weeks had passed since Cassian's arrest, and William's life had completely changed. The plant now operated without the shadow of corruption, but new challenges arose every day. The main one was sitting at his dining table, focused on a drawing that covered an entire sheet of paper. Maya had adapted to her new home with a speed that surprised even Isabella. Her photographic memory had proven to be even more impressive than they had initially imagined. The girl could remember not only faces and places, but also numbers, dates, and entire conversations with absolute precision. It was as if every experience was permanently etched in her mind. The investigation had revealed the full extent of Cassian's scheme. For 2 years, he had systematically siphoned funds from the company, creating a network of shell companies and fraudulent contracts. The total amount was nearly $500,000, a sum that could have completely destroyed the plant if not discovered in time. Uncle William, she said, looking up from her drawing, I remembered something else about that man Cassian was talking to on the phone. William stopped reading the morning paper, Since Cassian's confession, Maya had gradually recalled fragments of conversations she had witnessed during her nights on the streets of Havenwood. Each new piece of information helped piece together the puzzle of corruption that had nearly destroyed his family's company. "What man?" he asked, approaching the table and noticing she had drawn a middle-aged man with impressive accuracy. "Timothy. I saw him talking to Cassian in the square near where I slept. He said he was going to fix the car, but that this time it was for real." The revelation made William's blood run cold. Timothy Santos, the same name that appeared on the mysterious payment records he had discovered during his late-night analysis of the documents. There was a deeper, more sinister connection than he had imagined. Isabella entered the room carrying a tray with fresh coffee and donuts she had bought at the downtown bakery. But she paused when she sensed the sudden tension in the air. Over the past few days, she had learned to read the shifts in William's mood, especially when they related to discoveries about the case. Did something happen? Maya remembered something important about Timothy Santos. The name made Isabella frown as she placed the tray on the table. "Where have I heard that name before?" "He was receiving payments from the company for months," William explained. Grabbing one of the folders he now kept close at hand. "Supposedly as a technical consultant, but now we know it was to sabotage the car." Maya continued drawing, adding details to the man's face, but spoke without looking up from the paper. "He said he was the brother of someone who burned to death. He said he was going to get revenge for his family." The connection finally clicked into place in William's mind, like pieces of a puzzle fitting together. Timothy Santos, brother of David Santos, Maya's father who had died in the textile mill fire 5 years ago. The revenge wasn't just about money or power. It was about a family tragedy that had shattered multiple lives and generations. "Isabella, can you check the old files to see if David Santos really worked here? I need to know exactly what happened." While Isabella left to retrieve the records from the plant office, William sat next to Maya, watching as she continued to draw with the concentration of a professional artist. "Do you remember your dad?" The girl nodded, her large eyes filling with a sadness a 4-year-old shouldn't carry. Even after weeks of care and affection, there was still a deep melancholy that surfaced when she spoke of her parents. "He was nice. He always brought candy when he came home from work. And he sang that song I sing. Did he talk about his work?" "Sometimes. He said there was a bad man at the factory who didn't like the workers. Mom would worry when he came home sad." Isabella returned with a dusty folder, clearly very old and rarely consulted. "Found it. David Santos worked here for 6 months, 5 years ago. He was fired for complaints about safety irregularities." The full picture began to form in William's mind, and he felt a wave of nausea as he realized his own indirect responsibility in the tragedy. David had been fired for questioning unsafe practices at the plant, likely implemented by Cassian to cut costs and increase his personal profits. He then found a job at the textile mill, where he died in a fire that could have been prevented with better safety measures. "Did Cassian know Timothy was David's brother?" Isabella asked, flipping through the documents. "He must have found out when the threat started," William replied, his voice heavy with guilt, "and he used it to his advantage, hiring Timothy to do the dirty work while feeding his desire for revenge." Just then, the phone rang with the urgency that characterized important calls. It was the sheriff in charge of the case, who had become a constant presence in William's life since Cassian's arrest. "Mr. Thompson, we have some major news. Timothy Santos turned himself in at the station this morning. He wants to confess everything he knows about the case." The meeting at the police department was revealing and emotionally devastating. Timothy was a man completely broken by grief and remorse, who had lost not only his beloved brother, but all hope for justice through legal means. When Cassian approached him, offering a substantial sum to sabotage a car, he saw an opportunity for revenge that seemed divine. "I didn't know it would be his mother," Timothy said through desperate tears that soaked his shirt. "Cassian assured me it would be William himself driving that morning. He said he knew his habits. And you agreed to participate in a murder for money," the sheriff asked sternly. "My brother died because of these business owners who only think about profit, who treat workers like disposable objects. I thought I was delivering justice, avenging all the workers who died from negligence." William listened in heavy silence. Maya sitting beside him, watching with her large, intelligent eyes the man who had directly contributed to the tragedy that changed their lives forever. When Timothy finally saw her, his face contorted into an expression of horror and regret that made him look 10 years older instantly. Are you David's daughter?" Maya nodded shyly, her voice small but clear. "Are you the Uncle Timothy my daddy used to talk about? He said you liked fixing cars." The question completely broke the man, who began to sob uncontrollably, his hands shaking violently. "Forgive me, little girl. Forgive me for everything I did. Forgive me for destroying your family even more." It was in that crucial moment that William made a decision that would change the course of all future events. Instead of fueling more revenge, hatred, and pain in an endless cycle of suffering, he consciously chose a different path, the path he knew his mother, Eleanor, would have approved of. "Timothy," he said, "do you really want to honor your brother's memory?" The man looked up with red, hopeful eyes. "Help transform the plant into the kind of company David would have wanted it to be. Work with us to create decent conditions for all employees." The proposal shocked everyone present. Isabella pulled him aside, whispering concerns about forgiving someone who had participated in Eleanor's murder. But William had learned something important from Maya. The child, who had lost more than anyone there, showed no hatred or desire for revenge. She just wanted to understand and move on. "Maya," he asked, "what do you think? Can we give Uncle Timothy a chance?" The girl looked at the broken man, then at William. "If he promises not to hurt anyone else." Timothy knelt to the child's height. "I promise, little one. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix what I did wrong." 6 months later, the metallurgical plant had become a benchmark for labor practices in the region. Timothy worked as a safety supervisor, dedicating every day to ensuring no employee faced the risks his brother had. Evelyn had legally lost custody of Maya after an investigation revealed years of neglect and abuse. The girl now had a real home where her exceptional intelligence was valued and nurtured. Isabella, who had initially resisted the idea of having a child around, had become like a mother to Maya. Her own pain from being unable to have children had transformed into unconditional love for the girl who had arrived so unexpectedly. On Christmas Eve, William found Maya in the garden, planting flowers in the bed she had dedicated to Eleanor's memory. The girl, now a full 5 years old, had grown so much, both physically and emotionally. Would Grandma Eleanor have liked the flowers, she asked, her small hands carefully arranging the petals. "She would have loved them," William replied, kneeling beside her. "And she would be proud to see how you helped uncover the truth." Maya smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart in the cemetery on the day that changed everything. "Uncle William, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. I remember everything because my daddy taught me. He said that if we remember the important things, we can help other people." William felt tears welling up in his eyes. David Santos had raised an extraordinary daughter, a child whose exceptional memory had become an instrument of justice and healing. That Christmas night, as Maya slept in her room, decorated with drawings of birds, now made with colored pencils instead of charcoal, William reflected on how tragedy had transformed into rebirth. Eleanor's death would never be forgotten, but her memory now lived on through the ethical company she had always dreamed of, and the child whose voice had finally been heard. Maya had arrived as a stranger, shouting truths no one wanted to hear, but she had become the heart of a new family, proving that sometimes the most precious blessings come disguised as the most painful losses. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.